everybody. I'm Lita Sands, and on behalf of AWS, it's a real honor to open this next session on personalized health and its role in transforming patient care. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, and most of the time working at companies like Pfizer and Novartis, where I help to drive new forms of patient engagement. In my role here at AWS, I work with worldwide enterprise leaders to help them move their commercial model forward too. And I think it's safe to say, as you've been hearing throughout the whole day, that so much has changed in the past 18 months. The patient that we met 18 months ago was someone who maybe was more resigned to accept the healthcare system as it was used to getting in a car and driving long distances and sitting in a waiting room for quite some time, maybe surrounded by other sick people. And they really were in much of a patriarchal system where they kind of did what they were told and maybe not so much responsible for their healthcare. But so much has changed. In the past 18 months, telehealth has had an explosion. According to McKinsey, they estimate as much as $250 billion has gone now into telemedicine, and as many as 46% of visits are held that way. And now we've seen many payers and providers have a digital front door to help triage patients. And before you think this is only in the realm of digital natives, according to CMS, prior to COVID, the number of Medicare primary visits that were conducted virtually was only 1%. But in the space of 4 months, that number zoomed to 43%, which is absolutely massive. Patients also got used to having things delivered to their home. So again, we saw an explosion in having their drugs brought straight to the front door. And then finally, they started to rely more and more on sensors and wearables, whether it was to do remote home monitoring or just have greater control of their health. So suffice to say, the patient you meet today is an incredibly different person. First of all, they no longer think of themselves as a patient. They're a consumer. They are experiencing healthcare like many other consumer experiences that they have. So they've shifted their context where they now see healthcare as a partnership with their provider, and they have a lot more agency and engagement. So before, again, you think this is just digital natives, according to a report that was done by Deloitte last year, people who are baby boomers and senior citizens are much more likely now to push back on their physician than people born after 1965. So what does this mean for life science organizations? We can start showing up in a very different way. Here are some examples of life science leaders who are doing things very differently. With Ferring Pharmaceuticals, they launched fertility house calls, which helps to bring IVF counselors into the home, recognizing that there was a lot of stigma for women who had to go into the doctor's office for this. Last week, they just went national in the US. Roche has created the Navify Tumor Board, and this enables oncologists and oncology care teams to see all of their patients' information in one place, EMR, claims, and with GE medical imaging, so they can move to diagnosis of critically ill patients as quickly as possible. And with Alexion, they had a partnership, and they have a deep partnership with the Rady Children's Institute to help accelerate the diagnosis of rare genetic disorders for critically ill newborns who are in the ICU. So the aperture has opened for us to, again, engage very differently with healthcare systems and healthcare practitioners. And in fact, they have also shifted their behavior. If prior to the COVID, 65% of all of our rep visits were in person, that almost swapped 1-for-1 to some form of virtual. It had to. And you know what? Doctors like that. So now 87% of them, according to Accenture, are looking for some blend of virtual and in-person so they can move to more of a self-service engagement with the healthcare system. So what I'd like to do now is, before we turn to this great panel that we have, is let's just do some polling and see how it's changed for you and your organization. So if I could ask that we put the poll up. And I'll stop sharing my screen now. And hopefully the poll is running. Okay, so we're going to start to move into the keynote now while that's going on. So again, I'm so thrilled to be with the leaders here in personalized healthcare, working at some pretty amazing pharma organizations who have really been moving to the front and center stage on this. And what I'd like to do now is ask each one of my colleagues here to introduce themselves and talk about how you see the role of pharma in personalized healthcare. So Julia, maybe we can start with you.
Yes, so my name is Julia Hering. I'm leading up a team called Digital Health Commercial in Novo Nordisk. And what we do is that we work on making digital health solutions available that help people using our medications to achieve the best possible outcomes, because we see it can be challenging to use medications. And we just want to support people to use them in the right way, because only then they will kind of realize their full potential. And addressing your question on where I see the role of pharma in personalized health or also in digital health, I think pharma has a great opportunity here, because pharma has all the knowledge about the medicines that people might use. So they have a unique insight into how they work and what the kind of potential unmet needs might be. And of course, this is not about kind of pharma peeking out a little bit, but there is a unique chance to get insights, to talk to the users, to find out what they lack, and then to co-create solutions that help them address any kind of challenges, barriers, issues that there might be. And I think just to add to this, one thing is that where pharma is super used to developing medications, I think there's a unique potential in looking into partnerships, because there is a big role in my view for medtech, for startups, for other players who have creative ideas, who have solutions in some dimensions more agile than pharma, and then there's really fantastic opportunities to see how you can work together to make the best possible available for the users that need kind of these solutions.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I often used to say that, working in life science companies, we had such a deep understanding of the journey that the patient went through. So how do we help share that knowledge with others? Excellent, thank you. Shwen, can I turn to you next?
Yes, hi, Lita. Great to be here on Next Pharma once again. Shwen Gwee, I head up global digital strategy at Bristol Myers Squibb with a major focus on digital innovation and digital health. And, I think, in the past, the way that pharma had operated, a lot of our effort was really focused on getting our medicines into the hands of the patient. And that was kind of where our responsibility ended. And then the patient support programs were there. They were more traditional, but they were secondary to the main goal of getting the medicines to the patients. I think now, as we see the rise of digital and the ubiquitous nature of digital platforms and solutions in the hands of patients as consumer-grade devices, things like mobile phones, as well as wearables, the opportunity to really start to enhance what our medicines can do, drive better outcomes, drive better adherence, and so on, leveraging these digital platforms, it should be part of our responsibility to ensure that our patients are the support they need in as personalized a way as possible in order to help their journey be supportive of themselves, and not just one size fits all, but actually much more personalized. With all the data we collect, it's now possible to be much more streamlined and personalized based on the data that we're collecting for each individual.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love in 2019, the first professional society around this launched, DIME, the Digital Medicine Society. And full disclosure, I'm a founding member of that. But it was with that recognition that, say, companies like Omada Health, through simple ideas like connecting a scale to a phone and having a diabetes nurse educator come in on a regular basis, we're able to reverse the risk of type 2 diabetes and even prevent it. So companies like DIME give us playbooks and best practices to achieve those similar results. So great thoughts on that, Shwen. And David, can I turn to you next?
Hello, everybody. Davidic here, Julia, Sven, Lita. Nice to meet you as well. I love obviously supporting Next Pharma, what it stands for, Dario and the team. So that's definitely why I made sure to come up here today. Been in back-to-back meetings all day. So guys, please, I'm shooting from the hip here for the most part. And really, this is my thoughts and my thoughts only. I currently work at Roche, where I'm the head of digital. Here fairly recently, a couple months now within this role. but really passionate about the space that we work in within life sciences, and really excited to be here to share some of my thoughts, right, in my opinions. In regards to personalized health, right, if you look at it from a larger spectrum, there's some amazing things. Like you mentioned Navify from Roche and some other great initiatives that are going on within the industry. I think there is, we'll continue to see a lot of good pockets of greatness. Where I would love to see is really the synergies and harmonizations across potentially companies or industries that don't see eye to eye, right? Because I think that's where the most value is going to come from a patient perspective. If you really think about getting back to really why we're here, right? We're really here to provide, better outcomes for patients, right? Ideally the decisions we make or don't make are determining whether someone attends a graduation or a wedding that they might not have been able to before, right? So we're really in a unique position to add value to society. And I think the more we can almost put sometimes of that competitiveness to the side, really create that harmonization across different, again, organizations that might not have seen eye to eye or have, competing, agendas. I think that's really where we're going to see the value. And due to the current situation we're in now, I think this is even going to force that matter even more so, right? Because there is going to be somewhat of a digital fatigue. There is going to be, excess of these solutions where, I think the best thing for everyone is really to synergize it and find harmonization where it exists. So happy to be here again. I look forward to the conversation with some amazing panelists.
Great. No, thank you. It's great to see you here, David. And next question I have for you is, and Julia, you touched on this a little bit, but how does pharma help to actually engage with physicians to make it part of the treatment pathway? I mean, do you see that this shift to virtual is starting to open the aperture to pull through more content beyond the traditional drug detail?
I thought about that question, and I think it's not purely related to that details are virtually. I think actually that the pandemic in the whole society, both with patients, with users, of course, also with doctors and nurses, but also with the healthcare systems, has opened up thinking about, can we do things kind of digital? Do we need to be in the same room, or can digital tools help us? So I think from that perspective, there started a lot of exploration just based on the situation to kind of complement the traditional way of having consultations, of having follow-up calls, to enrich that using digital tools. So yes, I definitely think there's a lot of new opportunities that are kind of facilitated by what happened during the pandemic. I'm not sure it's all only related to that details and sales calls are transformed into virtual meetings.
Yeah, interesting. I remember when I worked at Novartis in the Nordics, and we were rolling out iPads across the entire world to help reps engage differently with physicians. And in the case of hospital systems, they said, you know what, our physicians are too busy to have a rep come in, no matter if you have an iPad or not. So we had to shift the engagement to be more group focused. So do you see more and more of that happening too?
I think that's what we experience in the industry overall. Yes.
Yeah. Good. Shwen, I see you nodding your head too.
I was agreeing a lot with what Julia was saying. I think, it's not just sales teams, all field teams, right? Whether it's medical science liaisons, key account managers, clinical research associates, they all, in a sense, vying for time with the healthcare professionals in order to speak with them, support them, help them, talk to them about new products. Forced us in this situation we're in right now is to really think much more about how do we start to seamlessly integrate and make it much more of a pull rather than a push, right? In the past, I think a lot of times it was very much how do we get into their 5 minutes of free time or squeeze in somewhere. And now it's much more about how do we create the opportunity for them to really come to us to get things when they need it, what they need, right time, right type of content. And I think that's where our thinking has shifted now, and the need to use these virtual channels has just accelerated the opportunity for us to do that more efficiently.
Excellent, thank you. And David, how about you?
Yeah. Yes, no, Julia and Sven, I agree as well. And one thing I would say is, if you look back, right, this is kind of something even before COVID that we've been facing with at least the last 10 years, a decade, in regards to push versus pull. How do we optimize that interaction time, etc. And really what COVID has done is just really accelerate that. What we are seeing is within any organizational structure or industry structure, there's usually a bell curve, right? So you have your early adopters and you have people are really setting the stage on what future is going to be. And you'll see that many companies will sit back and watch and wait and see how it shapes out in where they position. But then there will be some of those leading companies that will actually shape how we interact moving forward. I truly believe on that latter part where it gets back truly to value creation. There will be situations where there is some items on the market that ideally might necessarily add as much value and don't necessarily need to monopolize that provider's time, right? Because remember, the time we take from them is the time we take away from their patients, right? And they already don't have enough time there. So really what I see is it's really coming down and making that shift to what part or what role does pharma play within the current value chain there, and then identifying that and understanding how we actually can provide solutions that add value. So what does that mean? That rips out your old school model of sales, marketing, medical, right? It really comes down to, but you have to make bold moves like that truly to say, you just can't say it, right? You structurally have to change compensation plans. You have to change org structures to really replicate the reality behind that. And truly, if you look at a lot of use cases, even outside of industry, if you can get to value creation, reward will come, right? Rewarding meaning that there will be extended lives on earth for patients, right? Patients getting better outcomes. Ultimately, that ladders up to other outcomes and KPIs as well. So I guess my thought here to sum it up again is really, I think some of the forward-thinking companies will start transitioning our current model and getting away from the omnichannel or omnichannel, whatever you want to call it, approach, and more to how can we actually maximize time and show value? And half the value might not be showing up, right? But that's really where I think it's going to be heading.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And by the way, I want to also remind the audience, if you have any questions for this panel, please do put them in. We're keeping an eye on that. One of the interesting things that I've seen as we move more into precision medicine and precision health is kind of exactly what you said. Because it's getting more complicated. There's a lot more data out there. We need AI ML to be able to kind of turn that data into insights for clinicians. Companies have moved to maybe integrated more within the physician workflow. So for example, Cerner with their Healthy Data Lab, they were able to apply AWS SageMaker to predict when patients were going to be advancing to congestive heart failure. In this case, as much as 15 months in advance. So clinicians can take early intervention and prevent costly hospitalizations or even death. So the exchange looks like it's moving to one of more advanced data and algorithms that are part of the clinician workflow, so they can really make an impact in patients' lives in a demonstrable way. So, Shwen, I see you nodding your head. As we think about that engagement, do you see things transforming into that kind of data and insights exchange?
Yeah, absolutely, and I obviously nod my head way too much. I do think that it's already happening. Data has become really the goal that helps us inform what, right? The whole idea of next best action is not about pushing content. It's about pushing the right type of content or the right type of message or the right type of support to the right person at the right time. And all that is driven by AI and machine learning through huge data sets. And as we talked about earlier, as patients are also starting to collect a lot more data through wearables, through mobile phones, and so on, what we're getting is this, gold mine of real-world data that helps us understand better, how to identify, how to triage, how to stratify patients in a way that optimizes their treatment that we can also use to inform our healthcare professionals, right? So I think there's many pieces to this, but certainly data is the leveraging of data and applying AI and ML to really understand how to help pay a huge part of how we're actually bringing benefit to both patients and the healthcare professional.
Yeah. And in this shift to digital, now we've seen so many healthcare organizations and payer organizations wanting to have that first exchange be the digital front door. So it also gives rise to this new area of how do healthcare practitioners retool their own practices so that they're learning how to have active listening and empathy through a channel maybe they weren't that familiar with before. So, Julia, as your organization thinks about how to help patients get to wellness by using other types of devices outside of the healthcare setting, how do you think about tools that can help that healthcare provider be more successful working with a patient who's maybe more engaged in their healthcare and more digitally savvy than ever before?
I think for us it's super important to think in terms of benefits versus burden added, because Lita, you said like that we should help patients to get more engaged, and of course in some way I agree, but in another way I don't agree, because it's okay to expect that people are engaged when it's about the kind of spare time activities, about hobbies, whatever. But when you have a medical condition that you need to manage and potentially is chronic, then it's nothing anybody chose to have. And in that sense, it's of course you need some engagement to reach kind of better outcomes. But I think our thinking is much about like not being unrealistically ambitious about how to which level to drive that engagement, but more to say what is the easiest solution we can do, which puts the least burden, which can be used by the people that are not like super more than average digitally savvy. So we can kind of help people in an easy way that's not creating a need for them to use a lot of time or energy to kind of to use that solution. And this may sound commonplace, but actually when you then discuss kind of specific solutions, then I think in my experience, you get fast to a point where we kind of that discuss like new ideas, think something sounds fantastic, and stepping a step back and saying, okay, is this actually as fantastic as we believe for the people who are then supposed to use it in their daily busy lives, just as one thing out of so many other things to take care of. Then that's a real kind of stress test often, although it seems like a pretty easily in commonplace common sense question.
You know, you make a great point. And at AWS, we work with a lot of our customers using our culture of innovation to work backward from the patient and come up with new solutions. And we call it working backward because we start with the press release, which is very much focused on the customer and the end benefit. And sometimes our customers, our employees say, that's a lot of work. I just want to get in there and start building this solution or service. But the mistake you can make is you get so enamored of the technology and the bells and whistles that you miss the market completely and you miss your customer. To your point, they have a cognitive burden. They have a disease already. So how do you put yourself into their shoes and kind of have that empathy and develop tools that make sense for them in the moment? I think that's a really good point. We're getting some questions also for the audience. So let me put this one out there. Are you seeing feedback from healthcare practitioners about digital health and pharma solutions? You know, what is the voice of the customer that you're hearing yourselves? So Davidek, maybe I could ask you if you have some insight to add to that.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're all seeing this. I think it comes down to, again, this is a question maybe for the larger group, but what role do we play, or what role should we play? As life science companies, our job is to really make sure, I mean, 2/3 of the world's potentially treatable diseases are not even discovered yet, right? So at what point do we focus on our strength, which is our science and our R&D, and really manufacturing and getting that to the patients versus being a tech company, being a hospital? Like, I mean, I'm curious what kind of, moonshots exist, but I guess it depends on the company's risk appetite and also really pipeline and what they have at their availability. It's interesting. I think the feedback what we're hearing is, time is valuable and we need help. The question is how we can help. And then it depends again on the partner, right? At the end of the day, we want to make sure it's really about the patients and ultimately driving better patient outcomes. If that means investing in something that's totally outside of our product or even our space, we're seeing companies do that, which is the right thing to do, right? Yeah. So again, it really depends on the company's positioning and risk appetite. And some companies have that luxury and some don't, to be very transparent. Some are shareholder bound, some are not. And that's really what I'm physically seeing.
Yeah, and so many drug manufacturers are now recasting themselves as data-driven research organizations or data and technology organizations. So you kind of put your finger on this pivot, I think, that the industry is going through. But we've seen a couple of moonshots out there, and I think while moonshots are incredibly aspirational and they help to move the market forward, to your point, maybe it's the smaller incremental changes that we make every day that help move people forward. Things like Roche's Navify, right, which is just an amazing way of understanding the clinician's needs and coming there to help kind of de-silo data and make it easier for them to move forward. I think is just one of the best examples I've ever seen. And, you know, Shwen, as you think about the industry, and do you agree or disagree with this idea that we're moving toward being data and technology companies first?
It's interesting. I think, you know, as far as life sciences, always be much more focused on scientific and medical discoveries as the core essence of what we do. But so much of that is now driven by data, right? And so in order for us to really achieve even our core goal of life, we need that data, we need that technology. AI and ML is being applied across the value chain from drug discovery to global drug development to commercialization. And so I think inherently we will become very much data and technology driven companies, but our primary purpose as life science companies as, you know, being scientifically and medical driven initially, but then now, as you were talking about today, I think, you know, the role of a company is changing in terms of also supporting the patient to be able to achieve the best outcomes and best experience at the end of the day, and that may include digital health technologies as part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and real quick, sorry, Lita, right? And Sven, really good point there. But I'm curious. You know, you have to look at the indicators outside our typical scope, and you see the big players like Google, et cetera, stepping out of the space, and they are the data companies in the world. I mean, that's not our realm. So I'm curious, what are these? Is this shaping, or what do you? I'm sure you know Dario has a whole section on this, but I mean, that's something that we have to keep an eye on, right? Because there is some large players that are better than we would ever be in this space that are saying, hey, we haven't cracked that nut yet, right? It's not the right time. So, I mean, that's something that we do need to make sure it's in the back of our minds, and ultimately make sure, again, we're getting back to adding value and delivering the best science we can, right, to benefit society.
Well, I have to, maybe as a closing comment, I'll tell you one thing. I have never been more excited and honored to be a part of this industry than I have in the past 18 months, when so many pharma companies have stepped up and delivered a vaccine that normally would have taken 10 years and compressed it into one. So, I mean, we need to stand on the shoulders of these tremendous achievements and that investment that we have made in these amazing scientists that are out there. So I want to thank you all so much for the great comments that you had today. And for all of you out there, you know, there's a new role emerging for pharma. You can be like Amazon and still deliver the world's best medicine and be very customer centric in doing that. So really appreciate your thoughts and comments today. Thank you so much.
Very much, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.